Welcome to the weekly sync. Allie, I think you're our MC.
Yeah, so that means we're ready for demos. So who wants to do a demo first?
Do y'all want
Actually,
to?
just
Ours is unfinished, so I feel like it would be better to like piggyback off of after you.
Sure, yeah. I don't know. I wasn't sure how clear I was last night. I just finished the last refactoring of it where it's only rendering one info window. Based on what you and Shane had talked about on the office hours. And I just wasn't sure if Allie or Andrew wanted to approve before we merged it of the code, but we can go ahead and demo.
Yeah, I mean, just a reminder, demos are sort of, it's like really the point of it is to make sure we all understand the state of the app, right? So if there's stuff that's made it to production, great, we'll like show that off. If there's stuff that's in progress, we can talk about what the state is, like what progress has been made, what's left to do.
Yeah. Do you want?
No, what were you saying, Rachel?
I was just gonna say, did you want to start or did you want me to start? That was.
Either or. I feel like we both are like we did a lot of iterations of this.
We did.
So I feel like we both
a lot of trial and error. Okay, well, I can just start and go through like the AC sum, and then we can kind of move from there.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. All right, let's see. So everything always gets in my way. Okay, so ours was allow user to tap pins for more info. It was part of integrate with the Near Me API. And we really did think we were gonna get to 2 issues this week, but the world had other plans. We even like talked about it on Tuesday. And description is, as a user, I want to tap on map pins so I can learn more about the space. And then pins have been the assumptions on pins have been rendered to the map. We will use info windows to display additional details for each page. The info windows are actually, they come with the Google Maps API, but they don't come with the library we're using. So we had to just make our own. And then the AC is, user can tap on a pin on the map to open an info window with the following details about the place, name, description, thumbnail if there is one, rendered at the largest size possible within the info window, a distance of the place to the map center in kilometers, and a link to the place on Wikipedia. And links should use the page ID property returned in the API and the following format. So, and then given a user viewing the map in the app and the pins rendered, when the user taps a pin, an info window should open with more details about the place. Given a user viewing an info window with more details, when they close the X in the info window should close, returning them to view before they open the window. Okay, so that was the AC. Do you want to share the code?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. And maybe what it looks like.
All right, can everyone see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
So just to demonstrate some of the functionality that we went through. So essentially last week we had location pins rendering, either being a pin showing like kind of the image if there was a thumbnail image present, or like a default icon. And so this stories functionality adds on that if you click on a specific pin or like location pin, you get like a little info window that gives you more information as per the AC. If you hit the X, it closes out. And then a lot of the iterations that we did was initially we had info windows that you would click on one, and if you clicked on a different one, it wouldn't, like it would also be open as well as the first one that you clicked. And so now it's as you click one, like the last one that you clicked on will close. And so, oh no, go ahead. It sounds like you were about to say something.
No, I think I thought I saw like a bug when you double clicked, but to be figured out at a later time. Yeah, because this is we just figured this out like last night. We spent like 2 days trying to get it so it just have one. Because initially our first idea was like they were all being rendered, but when you clicked, you just displayed. So the displayed went. And then Andrew pointed out that like, well, that might work on a mobile device in Oregon. If we're in like Rome or even New Orleans, that's a lot of action or
Be a lot of DOM nodes and
DOM
like
things,
yeah. So take more memory and different things.
I'm like action for that.
Yeah, I think to your point just now, I think the just for us to focus on later, the bug might be that if you hit the X button, like the X button probably needs to do whatever we're doing whenever you click a different one, because I don't think it's setting this like state back to false.
I just
I
think
think that's weird. But in terms of the work that we did this week was mainly in the map location pin and info window components. I think info window we actually just created this week. And so essentially we got a lot of like practice with using this specific Google Maps library and how you need to like specifically interact with children that are within it. Because at first we were trying to pass on-click handlers to the actual location pins, thinking that like if you would click on a location pin, it would like kind of take in that event listener and like perform the action. But we found that this like on child click kind of property on line 34 is a more accurate way of like actually targeting the children that are in this like Google Map React component.
Okay.
And just real quickly to get to while you're showing the code, we did add contacts, which we'd love to integrate through the whole app to make it easier to centralize the app architecture. I just remembered as well.
Yeah, no, that was really important too, because as we were like working through, kind of like one thing that was slowing us down was trying to make sure like the right components had the right data and the right props and things like that. So
Like,
kind of in tune with our last project, it just seemed like it would make sense to incorporate content.
Because we were like, is this a child? Is this a sibling? Is this like an auntie? Like, how can everyone get all the information? And so context is really helpful to streamline that.
Yeah. And then definitely correct me or jump in if I'm missing anything in explaining this part. But essentially, in terms of like the actual functionality to show the windows, we created state, like we had tried a bunch of different methods, but the last place we ended off was creating a more complex looking state in the map component. So we have show window, which is an object containing both false or show as set to false initially, and then a blank ID. And we're passing that function to actually set that object to each location pin as an on-click for the child.
Right. And so what they're doing is it's setting the ID to the key. And then when you go into location pin, there's a ternary that's saying that like if show ID, basically if it equals, if that ID, if it exists and that equals the dimension key, which is the dimension. So like what we also realized this week, we were trying to pass like the word key, but React has a special thing where it won't let you pass key or ref as props because those are React words. So this Google Map actually has its own prop called dimension key. It comes with a lot of its own props. So key actually becomes dimension key. And then basically, in the location pin, it's saying if the ID is the same, the ID is the same as that dimension key, then the info window will show, if not null. And so
for the specific info windows, those also take into props, that being like the dimension key and the actual location data, which is essentially all of the data that's being returned from the API. And then it just parses through that object of like location data to render out like the title on line 15, or uses a ternary on line 16 to say like if there is a thumbnail present, like render out an image with that thumbnail, otherwise like leave it blank. So like in the ones where the pins are just pins, like the default icon, sorry, I think I clicked on that one, it would just have like no image there.
He's looking
Are you?
good.
Yeah, it's great.
We also
Well, I'm just wondering, are you waiting for another review? Is that sort of where we're
I
at?
just wanted to make sure that you or Ali were fine with the way that we the way that we just set that last bit up.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we can take care of that right after the
Yeah.
meeting.
Oh, and yeah, and so then we can also after that, like go through the context that we created and what we did with context.
Yeah, that'd be really good to share that. Yep.
And,
So essentially, we like moved the API call from app into the locations context, and then just had it render as a provider in the app component, so that like whenever the app component is rendered, we're essentially like running through this API call, getting back all of the responses based on locations that are within the initial coordinates that were sent as the center of the map, and then passing those down as locations, coordinates, and zoom level.
and the idea,
Yeah.
And the idea is that like whatever the next, unlike the next story where we have the users entering their lat and long, that it will go through context, right? And like this will be based on the user's input, like, and then it will go in the URL. We already have it set up as the interpolate, like how is it said? Interpolation?
Interpolated.
Interpolate. Thank you. I'm so bad with some big words. Usually I don't have to say them that often when I'm talking about code. But yeah, so that we were planning on like what it's going to look like next.
So assuming that there will probably be like another call in here or some function set up to like get those coordinates, and then we would replace it here.
And I don't know, Caitlin, are you familiar with context at all?
Yeah, I've used it before. I think that's a good idea for this. And yeah.
Okay, cool.
I'll like bring it in to our work. I think like what I was thinking is that once you guys merge to develop like today, or sorry, main, then I will merge main into my branch and then make some adjustments and finish it up.
Definitely. And also, yeah, exactly. It will be that. And context, of course, can get bigger. This was just like to start off and to start it. So then you know how to do the like, I guess in map, if you want to go to map right now. Yeah, you can see that we just we set the locations based on context right there.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then you put location provider in
App.
You wrap it around. Yeah. Cool.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was helpful. We were just thinking about, we actually thought we were going to get to the story where the user enters the input. So we were kind of thinking of like what the app would look like for that. But we struggled a lot, not struggled, but yeah, it took a little longer to figure out how to Google Map React library itself and how it does with like, what is the parent and what is the children and what can access what props and not.
Yeah, it's like the whole page being essentially like an interactive component. It really plays around with like where you would expect certain event handlers and things like that to work. So I think that was
right, exactly. But it was a good learning lesson for us, especially around like events and to try to figure out props.
I definitely feel a bit more confident with it. So that's cool.
Yeah, exactly. Anyone have any questions? Oh, and you also added the tab index, right? So you could tab through.
Yeah, so we talked about in office hours, like for the sake of accessibility, adding in some more descriptive ARIA labels as well as like tab indexes on each of the like pins, just so that if you're on the page and you start tabbing through, like you kind of are able to access the pins without having to like click on them.
Awesome. And are you able to get inside one of the info windows too? Does that work?
I don't think this is attached to like a enter key, so I would doubt it, but yeah, I don't think so. But we could, if there's a way to attach that same function to like the return key, we could add that.
Or where you could have it where you enter and it can either take you to the Wikipedia page or like X out. Yeah.
So at this point of the project, like that could be something we just track in Jira, like add a ticket that we can come back to at some point, or if somebody has like a little extra capacity one week.
Okay, add ticket and like make the info window a little bit more accessible with entering.
And especially if you have a sense now of how you might do that, record that there, because if we get back to this 3 weeks from now and we kind of like, what did we say we were going to do, right?
Right, exactly. Where you enter it and it takes you to the wiki page, or you enter it and it X's you out.
Our note, really quick. I was thinking as I was clicking, I think this might be where we need to put like setting that show state that we have in map
back to false. Okay, good to know. Good. Yeah, that was
Cool.
Yeah.
Good.
Looks great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll take a look at that as soon as we're done, so you guys can
Yeah.
get
Again,
merged and whatnot. All right,
I'm
Caitlin.
gonna grab coffee. I'll be right back. Give me one.
Okay.
Super important. Cool. Yeah, that looked really good. It seems like y'all did a lot of work this week. I felt like both tickets were a little bigger this week than previous weeks. I don't know if y'all felt that too, but ours was, I don't know if ours ultimately was that big, but it felt big because it took us a while to just kind of figure out how to do the table. The first thing we kind of started looking at was using like different plugins, like React Table is kind of the first thing that comes up when you Google, like, I want to make a table in React. And so we started using that, but it comes with a whole bunch of kind of just like syntax that I didn't really understand. And we were trying to figure it out and it didn't work exactly with the API. And so then we scrapped that and started trying to do another table. I forget what that was called. And then Devon and Allie got on a call and was like, oh, just make a regular table using like table tags. And I'd actually never done that, just made like a from scratch table. So didn't even occur to me. So yeah, it was like a lot of trial and error also at the beginning of the week. But so ultimately what we wanted to do was create a table on the list page that basically lists out all the locations that you're seeing on the map page. And we want to have all the same information on the table as the map and a link to the Wikipedia. And it should be sorted by distance. So the things that we have not finished is sorted by distance and the distance even being on the list, just because I think we kind of forgot.
That's funny. You know, it's funny, like I've been doing this stuff so long that I forget that like they're like people haven't ever hand coded a table. You know, like it's just like it just doesn't occur to me. So
Yeah,
I think
I started out hand coding tables.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
That was how you did things.
That's how you did, like that's how you made emails and that's how you did layout.
Yeah.
But it might be that's probably an opportunity for us to add to either the AC or the coaching notes or something for the mentors that just like keep this as simple as possible. You shouldn't need any kind of packages to or anything.
And maybe something about how the distance is included, because Shane and I did do that.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's fine. I mean, honestly, we had done something similar in the last project. So we set up the lib and we set up the function and we just added it. But yeah.
Sorry, Caitlin.
Oh no, you're good. Yeah, I think it is interesting that for some reason sometimes your mind goes to the more complex way of solving an issue.
Yeah.
Like, okay, bring it back. Like, there's definitely many times I've made that mistake. Anyway, so for one, we decided to move to New Orleans because it's a little more exciting than rural Oregon. I don't even know who Oregon is.
So the reason I chose that is so that I could have an example of just an integer as one parameter and then a negative float as the other parameter.
Oh, okay.
It just happened to be near Willamina or whatever that place is called.
Got it. Yeah. So yeah, we moved it over just because it was a little more interesting. There's more pins and we can have more table or info in the table. I also went ahead and put just like a white background for the bottom nav bar here. We still have to move the map up, but it was getting in the way on the list page because it was overlapping text. It was really funky. So anyway, this is the table we ended up creating. Location, description, link, image. Unless nothing shows up, then it's blank. We opted to keep it blank if nothing showed up. I thought it was a little too wordy to have a table filled with like no description available.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yep.
And the only thing is like, this is an iPhone 8 Plus that we're looking at right here. And I don't even have the distance listed yet.
Yeah, right.
column. So if you go down to like an iPhone 5, refresh, like it doesn't all fit. It becomes
Yeah. Okay.
scrollable. So that was one of my questions for the group was like, do we want this page to be scrollable to the right? If not, like 5 columns in what 320 pixels is like kind of rough. I don't know.
If you put it in, but if you were to like change orientation, it would probably relax a little bit.
True.
Um,
Should we just like have it either
Well-
scroll or have the user turn their phone sideways?
I had an idea that
Mhm.
maybe, and hear me out, for the mobile thing, that maybe the locations are just listed from closest to farthest, but maybe not necessarily distance. And maybe if you click them, it can tell you the distance.
like there's more. You
I was
could,
thinking it does look really good, I think, with those 4 columns, and a 5th might just be a little extra. So then maybe it's just sorted by distance, like what's closest. And then if you like maybe click something, it can tell you how far it is, but it doesn't necessarily have to have the distance in kilometers. Does that make sense?
I guess my only question would be like, so you click somewhere in this row, where would we want the distance to show up?
It could just
Well,
be like a little pop up.
or I'm thinking maybe like just a details element or something where there's like a little arrow on the left. And maybe what you do is there's an arrow on the left and you link the name out to the Wikipedia page. No, actually, if you're gonna do a details element, I would just have the name of it. And I would do the name and the thumbnail and have a little arrow. You tap on the arrow and you get the description and the link to the Wikipedia and the distance. Like maybe that's a way to do it.
So like,
This is our first time doing this
Mhm.
story, so we hadn't actually built it ourselves. But I think you're totally right. Like it's way cramped.
yeah.
So I have an article, or I did, I'm trying to find it, from EJ about doing accessible tables. I want you to take a look at it, but I would consider it sort of overkill for what we're trying to accomplish here in the time span we're trying to accomplish it. But they effectively make the table not a table and make it a list so that you can
Yeah.
add heights, but it's exceptionally complicated. I will share it when I find it so everyone can read it.
Yeah. So I guess maybe the bright side is that you learned about tables. But maybe we back out of doing a table. And so I just put a little snippet in the Zoom chat here, which I will copy out to the team channel. But if you did something like that, so a details element, if you just had just a bunch of details elements, I guess the only thing is the sorting. Yeah, I guess sorted by distance is a nice way to do that. And then you could, they're actually really simple, and you get the little arrow thing for free and stuff. So this is another case where you wouldn't need to install some package to do this for you. Like it's all built into HTML. The summary is what shows up when it's closed, and everything else is what shows up when it's open.
Interesting.
Can I
Hold up.
ask
Yeah.
another question about this table? Just from like a UI kind of UX experience. Is there gonna be a ticket to be able to sort it by like to search in it?
I don't.
Like because I
Um,
think it would be cool. I don't know how y'all feel. If within this table there was like a search bar.
So
Yeah,
go ahead.
there's a story for searching for a location. Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah. Within
Okay.
the table.
Not like filtering these results or something.
No, I mean, I would think like, again, like filtering it by distance might be like a good start, but then just like a search, so you could search in it, like specifically
Yep.
if you're on, okay, well, if that's coming, then good. I just thought like if you're using it on a mobile app and you're in somewhere like New Orleans or even like Rome and you're like, where's this thingy? Like you'd want to tap that, or like, where are all the churches?
Yeah, for sure.
So okay. So we definitely want to have it sorted by distance. And then it seems like do we want to go that path of not making it a table anymore? I don't know. What do we think?
I think so.
Ooh,
I mean,
what
it's just gonna, yeah, what?
I was just thinking, what if instead of having a link, 1,000 links that say Wikipedia page, what if we make the name of the location the link to the Wikipedia page?
Yeah,
No.
that was the other thing you could do if you wanted to keep it a table. Yeah,
And then we can
you're
have,
still gonna need to add the distance, right? So
and then it would still be 4 columns, but the distance column would at least be small because it would just say like 3 kilometers.
mhm.
Mhm.
What do folks think?
I think that's better. The you could also have, well, let's see. Guess we should have thought this through a little bit better because this is actually very realistic. This
I was
happens.
gonna say it's like get to
Um,
like,
but and you can tell I'm not a professional designer. So I was thinking another option would be that you could keep it as a table, have one thing be sort of the name of the place that's linked to Wikipedia, have the thumbnail, and maybe even the distance, but then have in like the name might be in a details element that you could drop down to see the description or something. So you'd have a table where it's like the name, the distance, and a thumbnail, and that's enough to tell you whether it's something you're interested in seeing more information about it, in which case you would pop up the details element or something.
okay. All right.
Maybe.
I've never used a details element either, so that could be fun to mess with.
Mhm.
So- Oh, go ahead, Caitlin.
Oh, I was just going to continue explaining and go to the code, but if you have questions, go for it.
Oh no, go ahead.
So yeah, I think the best thing to do will be, I mean, we'll pull in location context now once I merge in from main, and then we can like sync that all up so it's pretty. Add distance, but yeah, this is basically the table. It's just pulling location data in and printing it out, similar to what y'all are doing on the map. And we have the table headers down here. So this helped build the table was kind of these guys. And then
I actually really like the fact that you pulled the row out and have that as a separate component. That makes it a lot easier to follow what's happening.
I believe we have Allie to thank for that.
Okay.
You take credit for it.
It was my idea, and thank you. It wasn't.
I have another question. Should the first thing be called location or should it be called name?
Probably name.
I feel like location, I'm usually thinking of like an address.
And you might even say like place or something, but like name is a little generic, but it's like these are sometimes they're like
Yeah.
count, Skagit County or like,
Yeah.
like it's all kinds of random stuff.
Right. Totally.
Do we want to call image or like photo or anyone care?
I could even see just having the image next to the place name.
And not using the word image.
Yeah, people will.
I'm kind of thinking of that. Bring this column to the left of the place.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, okay. So we can kind of clean up and reshuffle the table
Mhm.
a little bit. But in theory, this work shouldn't take too much longer. And then whoever, I can kind of take it with me to my partnership this week and we can finish this and then grab
Mhm.
something else.
Okay. Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't know if there's anything else. So we added a table component and some CSS that, yeah, you have to kind of set. One of the things I thought was cool was this border collapse thing. It took me a while because the table was funky because it has this like grid that automatically comes with it.
Mhm.
So if you do border collapse, that makes it pretty. And then I just did even and odds to like set the colors a little different within child.
Nice.
So we can change that once we figure out a color scheme for the app, but just with Grace.
Hey, EJ.
All right.
Hi, everyone.
And I think, oh yeah, and then in the list component is just the table with the locations in it right now. So we took out the title that said list at the top. I don't think that's necessary unless anyone else wants it. And Oh, and then I made it the overflow scroll so that you can scroll through this without scrolling the nav bar at the bottom.
Cool.
That's
I wonder
great.
if you could pin the headers to the top of the page.
I tried for like 10 minutes and then I wanted to put a PR up. So I
Fair.
Did you try position fixed? Is that what you tried? Or
yeah,
how that
I
worked?
think that's what I tried. And I think my problem was that I was having trouble maybe accessing. So table headers, I like put class names in, but I was having trouble. I don't know, maybe we should just try again. For a while, I like couldn't like access the elements of the table that I wanted to.
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah, see, that's what happens. So
Oh,
yeah.
I see. Okay, so you could do some things to fix all that.
Yeah.
But maybe that's again kind of a stretch goal, or like we could write another, like a small story to do that later on in the project.
Yeah, that could be part of the CSS cleanup or something.
Yeah,
later.
for sure. Okay.
Or we could
Cool.
try to get it done, but
Mhm.
yeah. Anyway.
Nice.
All right.
This week has been really interesting. It's like it's a little lesson in scope creep. Familiar with that term? Caitlin's probably familiar with that term. I bet you guys talked about that at work. But there are the AC, and then as we see it, we're like, oh, but it'd be nice if it did this, and like we should we shouldn't have more than one info window open at a time, like even though it's not something we specified. Like those little things, and that just adds scope, and then like all of a sudden it's like, wait, we didn't even get the thing done this week, Whereas like if this was a production product and we're like, oh, we have pins, but we need info windows, like users really want info windows, we would probably, the disciplined thing to do would be to be more strict about like, let's get info windows out, even if it's not perfect. And then next week we'll make it so only one's open at a time, right? So my apologies, I kind of scope creeped us a little bit this week in office hours, I think. But yeah, so are we good with demos? Because this kind of leads into my learning module a little bit.
Yeah,
Cool.
I think that table looks great, Caitlin.
Yeah, for sure.
I love the white, the grayscale. It's just super easy to like get that information.
Yeah, great job, everybody.
Yeah, I think that was a really great addition that EJ suggested back in the day. So scope creep. So had we had all this scope in the AC, it might have made sense. Like maybe those stories would have been sort of too big. Like we haven't really had a talk as a team about what a right-sized story is, but we did talk about what right sizing is back in the first meeting. My team at Zapier, like we want things to be done in about 3 days, and that's sort of our expectation. So, if that was what we were kind of aiming for here as well, then yeah, these stories are probably a little bit too big, and that happens in the real world as well. And one of the things you do as a team to mitigate it is you do story splitting. So that is what the learning module is about. Optimize for video clip, because if I don't, you'll be seeing the first slide for the whole presentation. All right. So story splitting, let's see. Where to start? I guess I can follow the slides. That might be a good way to start. All right. So yeah, we want to right size our stories. The story, I think we all kind of know this, but just to make sure it's kind of recorded for posterity's sake. A story is a description of an improvement to the product. So it's usually written from the user's perspective. As a user, I want to pan around a map so I can see pins, marking places of interest, that kind of thing. Stories are used both in Scrum and Kanban. So they're both it's kind of a universal way of documenting this kind of stuff. In Scrum, teams typically assign stories points so that points capturing relative complexity. That can be t-shirt sizes sometimes, like extra small, small, medium, large, extra large, or it can be numbers in a Fibonacci sequence. There's lots of techniques for assigning story points, and the whole point of that is to, over time, learn what your velocity is in Scrum. I think we talked about that before. So, if you're doing the Fibonacci sequence, like you start to learn, this team typically gets 20 stories done in a sprint or something, and then you can kind of start to predict as a business like what you're going to do. In Kanban, the way we go about it is we try to right size stories. So, like if it's 3 days or whatever the range is, if all the stories are around that size, it starts to get predictable as well. Like we're finishing 5 stories a week. And so then we know that, like we can kind of predict based on how many stories are in the backlog when we're going to be done. So slightly different ways of going about it, but they have the same goal of just trying to make the work more predictable, which helps the business do planning and resourcing, all kind of stuff. So story splitting is actually taking a big story and breaking it down into multiple smaller stories that achieve the same end result. So as an example, as a user, I want to be able to manage my account on xyz.com. Well, that actually implies a lot of different things, right? Manage my account is actually includes logging in, resetting your password, maybe uploading an avatar, maybe viewing past transactions. Like those are all things that go into managing an account. So that's kind of an obvious one, maybe. So one that you might be able to relate to from your previous TCL experience. The smart shopping list could have been one story, right? It could have been, as a user, I want a shopping list that learns my habits. That's pretty vague and broad. So, and there's a lot more stories than just these 4, but, as a user, I want to be able to create a new list, or as a user, I want to be able to add an item to my list, mark an item as purchased, view a list in order of when I need to buy them next, that kind of thing. So sometimes these big stories are called epics. So, and there's even, so an epic is made up of multiple stories, and sometimes there are even what are called sagas, which are made up of multiple epics. So these things are meant to be kind of like a tree. In the end, sagas and epics are they're still stories in the way that they're constructed. They're still a description of some user-facing value. But you can, through the process of story splitting, you can sometimes, you sometimes end up with this kind of tree of related things that all kind of ladder up to a top-level story. All right. So what's the big deal, you ask? Maybe you didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Stories ideally should have these following characteristics, and ones that are too big usually don't have all or most of these. So these stories should be independent. They shouldn't be dependent on other stories. A big story is going to be dependent on multiple stories, but one of those individual stories should be able to be kind of done and shipped in relative isolation. Sometimes there's a sequencing thing there, but in any case, it should be something you could kind of do on its own. Good stories are negotiable as well. So, we have stories on our board, but those are our idea of what we think should happen. And so if you are in there and you're looking at the story, or you started working on it, and like Caitlin, like you're like, this table is really cramped. Like the way you're describing the story, what the acceptance criteria are, probably not going to be a great user experience. Totally valid to get in the channel or get on, an office hours or something and kind of negotiate that a little bit. Say like, hey, we started to implement it this way, but it looks like this. Like, do you think we should maybe do something else? And we can, as a team, decide like, oh yeah, we should back out of that decision and do something that's better for users. It should be valuable, so it should provide some kind of value to some stakeholder. Usually that's end users, but that can also be, like if it's a CMS, like you might have like the writers who are using the CMS might be an audience as well as sort of your end users, external end users. Estimatable, if that's a real word, I think it's a real word. So it should be unambiguous enough to estimate how long it's going to take to complete. So, and that kind of goes along with the next one. It's small enough that you can visualize the whole solution. So if you can kind of envision like the way the whole thing is supposed to go, that makes it easier to be like, oh, I think that's going to take this long. And so, big stories, it's much harder to do that. Anything over about 3 or 4 days, like you're going to run into things that blow the scope out or whatever. It's just going to be hard to estimate. And then testable. So you should be able to tell when it's done. Okay, so that's like we do demos, and demos, it's like we didn't have this thing, now we have this thing, right? So so those are sort of the characteristics of a good story. I see, Caitlin, you have a question about Scrum versus Kanban.
I can save it for the end because it's kind of sidebar.
Okay, all right, no problem. So, story splitting. So Agile is supposed to allow a team to deliver as much value as possible by focusing on the highest priority work. So what I have found, and what they say, but what I've also found in my own practice is that the last 20% of the work takes 80% of the time. Yep, getting a thumbs up from Caitlin there. Small stories. So sometimes we talked about waterfall versus these things, right? We talked about waterfall a little bit. So a lot of times, one of the big problems with waterfall is that okay, so you have a requirements gathering phase at the beginning of the project. And people think, this is my chance to get all the things in so that they actually get done, they get addressed in the project. So what tends to happen is like there's this kitchen sink effect where people like try to think of everything they could possibly want, and then that becomes a requirement, and then the project takes a year and a half, and everyone's like, why did we do that thing in the first place? It's not even useful, right? So by using an agile methodology, by using an agile methodology, the team every so often checks in, like we have these demos, and if we got to a point where like, I don't know, that's great, it's good enough, ship it, we're done, you know, you could do that at any point. By having smaller stories, it means you have more granularity of being able to decide when that happens. You know, if your story was big and included 3 different features, you would have there'd be this expectation that you could get all 3 of those features done before you ship the thing. But maybe you really only need one of them. Maybe one of them is the really high value thing and the other 2 are, you know, nice to haves or something, right? So small stories give the business really more flexibility in deciding when it is done. All right, so now on to the how. So user goal decomposition. So decomposition generally is a really good thing to learn. It's you know, it's how you take a big, like, hard to deal with programming problem, and you can decompose it into, well, I know I'm going to need this little piece of it, and that can stand alone, so I'm going to do that. You know, like kind of break things down into things that you can actually kind of figure out how to do. The same goes for user stories. So in this case, it's the process of taking a user goal and splitting it into sub goals. So this is an example from an article. As an owner of unwanted stuff, I can register on the online auction website so that I can sell my unwanted stuff. Well, that goal, you know, or that action, I guess, the register for online auction website can be broken up. Well, we could take that and break it up into 2 different stories. So I want to be able to enter my details, but I also want to be able to submit the details. So you know, you might build a form, but you also want to be able to submit it so that it gets saved to the database or something. Those both have the same, so that as the parent story has for its I can, right? So so that's one way of kind of thinking about story splitting, is like you could have multiple things that roll up to the I can line of, or I want to line of the parent story. Does that make sense? Right. Okay, so there's something called fault lines, which, whoops, you can not scroll around on it, do that. So these are ways that you can take a story and break them down, and they're actually also kind of in order. Like you should think about them in this order as well. So if you're looking at a particular story, and what we will do is look at there was a story that we have already completed, but it probably could have, you know, it could have been split. So functional versus non-functional requirements. So there's the feature itself, and then there's maybe performance, or I think the original article had accessibility here, and EJ, I took that out because to me that shouldn't be something that you split out that way necessarily. So, so functional versus non-functional requirements is sort of where you start. You know, if there's a way to maybe, you know, if it performs well enough, but you know you should at some point improve it, then you might move that performance goal out to another story later and start getting value from the feature. UI channel, that could apply to us. Like if we, you know, we're building really mobile first here, but if we decided we wanted this to work as a desktop app as well, like we're kind of deferring all, you know, like really inspecting this as a, like trying to make this optimal as a desktop browser app as well. So we're already kind of by default doing this UI channel, like splitting along those lines. And then user types. So like we don't really have this in our app, but you know, if you had like I was talking about a CMS, like you might have writers and editors as two different users of a CMS. And so the writers need a good authoring experience. The editors need a workflow, like an approval workflow or something. But so you might be able to split along those user types, not try to do everything at once. The level of the goal, so summary goals versus user goals. User goals being like that kind of something that a user wants to do. Summary goals being maybe sort of higher level goals for the app or something. The user flow. So have you heard the term happy path before? Is that something you've heard talked about? So the happy path is like if nothing goes wrong, what's the path through that feature? So like the canonical example is like a checkout flow on an e-commerce site, right? So if the user enters all the data correctly and their credit card doesn't get declined and all that kind of stuff, what's the path through that? And then, so you can, in some cases, it makes sense to code the happy path. And then in subsequent stories, like start to handle edge cases, the credit card's declined or they lose network connection or whatever, and kind of add those things on once you have the basic value added to the project. Level polish. So, this is, I really like this example where you might start off with just enter a date in a field, but that's kind of error prone and stuff. It's not maybe the greatest experience. And then, although a date picker is usually less accessible, but you might add a date picker on as sort of like an enhancement later. So you can, again, get the value out there and then make it a better experience later. And then steps or skeletons. So we actually did this with our, in the first story, let's just add in, basic routing and views. And then we're gonna, add stuff to those in later stories. So that's an example of that. Yeah, I think you meant to say pro tip, EJ, but protein works as well. Text inputs are good, yeah. Especially nowadays, like we didn't used to have libraries that could just parse random text input as a date, but those libraries are pretty good these days. Cool. So, any questions about these fault lines? We good? All right. How far is too far? So yeah, it is possible to split stories too far, especially like if you the first one back here is functional versus non-functional requirements. So like there's a temptation to, at least I've seen this in Zapier and places, there's a temptation to say like, oh, let's split it along like back end and front end, right? Like let's have a front end ticket and a back end ticket. And the reason that that's not a great idea is that neither of those by itself provides any user facing value. Like they can't be done independently. And it tends to introduce this friction. There's some coordination costs. There's a contract that needs to be made between the front end and back end. Whereas if you have, maybe a back end and a front end engineer working together on one issue that provides user facing value, then those coordination costs are reduced, and like when it's done, you're actually providing something to end users, right? So my little example here is a little absurd, but as a developer, I want to type the letter C for const, so I can start the process of assigning a variable, clearly taking it too far. So yeah, so this guideline here, that was kind of what I was talking about. If you're tempted to break a story down along like architectural lines or something, you're really creating tasks, not stories. And then when a story is so small that it doesn't provide user-facing benefit, I should actually probably change that to definitely too small. It's definitely too small. All right. So this is where you all unmute and tell me what you think about, was there a story from our current project that could have been split? Trying to think of, I honestly can't remember which one it was that we talked about could have been split probably, but oh, I think I remember what it was, but what do you think?
Seems like the one that Shane and Rachel just did seemed like a lot. I don't know, like you said, scope creep, like I don't know if anyone probably imagined that they would also need to like create context as part of that. So it might have been harder to like predict how to split it, but that would be what I would
yeah.
think.
Honestly, context took like 15 minutes versus us trying to figure out that on-child click, which at first took us like hours. We were like, what's happening? And we were like in the dev tools. So that I think is more.
We were like, we can do this like either one of us on the own time and then come back and tackle the more complicated like issues that we were facing. I think like what was like made the issue take the full week was kind of like the scope we were talking about, but I thought it was helpful because a lot of the things that we discussed ultimately make a more like professional and like performant looking app.
Yeah, so in that, I think in this case, like if we had specified the AC up front of having only one info window showing at a time, you might have taken a more direct route to the solution you ended up on, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have maybe taken so much time.
That's true. It would have been, we would have thought about how we were setting up the files and like the architecture differently.
So the one that I was kind of thinking of is, you know, rendering pins or rendering a table. Both of those have like a section where it's like, well, we need to access the API, and then we need to render the thing. And I know I just said like it's probably not the right place to split stuff along like back end and front end, but maybe there is maybe there's a way that these stories could have been written where there's a story where we get the API working and it's providing data to the app. And then we, you know, and maybe there's just like some, like we prove it by just printing out the first thing from the API result or whatever. And then the next, those other stories could then stand alone a little bit better. Like here's a rendering context, which is the map, and here's a rendering context, which is a table. And maybe that would have been a way to have, you know, stories that more easily fit into our goal of 3 to 5 days, whatever it is.
Right. I'm thinking. Yeah, I think it is helpful. I don't know how to. Maybe I'm just thinking about the way that we use context, and granted, it wasn't a story; it was just something we decided. But maybe if there is like some sort of element, like after we create the app structure, about like centralizing, or like one other story about like creating an architecture. Does that make sense? After those first 3, it was like create app structure before we start integrating the Near Me API. That was like maybe along like, yeah. Does that make like, and that would be like a separate smaller story that was around decide on like the best way. Like, do you want to use context or do you want to use this? Like, I'm not being very articulate, but yeah.
No, I think I'm following what you're saying. So yeah, I think that totally could have, that would be a good improvement for the next time we do this. Yeah.
That it goes with it, that is a part of the create app structure epic, right? That is like a story before the API Near Me is integrated. Yeah. It's just making sure all the teams are like, yes, this feels solid moving forward.
Yeah. Now there are probably things in the backlog that could still be split as well. So what we may do, what I'm also going to do, I'm the one running planning as well. So maybe after this, when we'll look ahead to kind of what's, you know, what we have queued up, and just a little late for these guys. I think the train's left the station, but you know, these 2, and if we add a couple more, we'll just take a look, kind of take a look at them through this lens of, you know, if there are fault lines that we can identify, and maybe split those into smaller stories. I mean, the way that we're doing things, we still haven't decided as a group what our target is, but you know, if we had things that were like 2 days, you know, then you're almost like you're guaranteed, maybe not guaranteed, but like it's more likely you'd be able to get maybe 2 things done per week, right? I still, you know, two days is still probably going to drag out into 3.5 days because of reviews and different things. But if we were sort of aiming for that as our metric, or you know, if we're comfortable with like, we'll just kind of try to chug along at one story per week. That should be our goal. we still, should look at these and just make sure that we think they're reasonably going to fit into that time frame. When you, I kind of talked about this a little bit with our project about the fault lines, like which ones apply to our project. But are there any that kind of jump out to you as, or maybe ones that you don't think are that relevant to us?
I feel like we're mostly handling happy path stuff right now. I mean, we have handled like if there's no information on like a thumbnail or whatever, like rendering that. But I personally feel like I maybe haven't thought a ton about edge cases, and maybe there are some that will come up later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting, just like you said, to like maybe do someplace like, I mean, I'm grateful we did New Orleans, but someplace even like Rome, which I'm sure is just like packed, and kind of see how the app reacts.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we'll find some things that,
Yeah, there might be, there might be a chance to test for some performance stuff at some point, right? Mm-hmm. This UI channel thing, I think, if we get to the point where we have a working, like a nicely polished sort of mobile app, we could take a look at that. If we have like the last week or last 2 weeks or something, I want to optimize it for desktop as well. Cool. All right. And then just I'll post slides in the team channel, but yeah, there are links to basically the sources I used to build up the deck here. So yeah, that's story splitting.
Cool. So my sidebar question that I just thought of when you were on that first slide was, do you think as like a junior developer, like going into their first developer role, that either Kanban or Scrum would be preferable?
That's a good question.
I guess I thought of it because like I am in a Scrum situation, and when I was first brought onto my team, I was given 1-point tickets to like, ease you in, get to know that app, like not a lot of pressure. And I really like that. And then I could work up to like 5-point tickets. And looking at Kanban, I was wondering if there's been, I guess I was just wondering like if as like a junior dev looking for their first role, if they would like want to prefer one or the other. Yeah,
that's a really good question. I think more important than the methodology is like quality project management, like being in a place where the acceptance criteria and like all that kind of stuff is really well documented, and there's good documentation about how the code base works and all that kind of stuff, and a place where you have the option of pairing with people when you get stuck, like that's not a given most places. So those things to me are more important than whether you have the ability to assign sort of 1-point stories to a person or something. Because the other thing, like in a Kanban setting, I was thinking of like, like Stacy's early career, and she's on my team, and we use Kanban. And there are, something might be like, it's like, build a component and style it is kind of the sort of easiest thing that we do. But those things still take time, right? Like, you still have to like integrate with some data source, blah, blah, blah. So like she's done a lot of that work for over the last like 6 or 8 months or something. And then there are things that are still maybe 3 days, but they're just like, they're more architecture level, or like having to, maybe there's like you have to coordinate across teams or something. And so the more senior people have been taking those.
That is really interesting to me, because like I see a lot of tickets and I'm like, maybe that would take 3 days for you, it would take 2 weeks for me. Like
yeah, sure. Yeah. And the other thing, Stacy wouldn't mind me talking about this. Like, she basically does a ton of pairing, and a ton of like we spent 8 months or something last year on building a new blog for Zapier. And Alejandro, who's another mentor here, he was sort of the lead for the front end build. And every single morning, he and Stacy would get on a call for, even if it was just for 15 minutes, they'd talk about PRs from the day before. They would make a plan for the day, like that day. he'd like kind of get her unblocked if she was having environment issues or something. They'd screen share and kind of get those things worked out, just so she was kind of like had a good plan for the day. And you know, if you ask her about that, she'll be like, "Oh my God, Alejandro was amazing," and like it was like so helpful and all this kind of stuff. So that stuff to me is like that kind of support, that built-in support, is way more important than the methodology. But I mean, I see your point about like, you know, that things could take longer or whatever. But like the way that we worked around that was like just some pairing, you know, Alejandro would make sure she kind of had a really good direction, kind of like knew, like even kind of maybe talk pseudocode out even some of the specifics of how to approach the thing. So
Yeah.
you didn't get bogged down.
So ultimately, supportive team more important than a kind of agile.
I think so. I
Makes
mean,
sense.
EJ, would you concur on that?
Yeah, I I definitely have bias toward Scrum methodology because it's the one that I've used the most, and it's the one that my brain sort of likes to break down tasks in more.
Mhm.
But as long as my teammates are able to explain problems to me and support me in solving them, I really don't mind either way.
Yeah, really good question though. All right, are we ready to move on to planning?
I think I am. I just wanted to say in response to you moving accessibility out of the separate scope sort of set of things, I agree with you. I think it can be something you do want to focus on for really complex problems, but most of the time it should be something that you just do as part of your basic building process.
Mhm.
But I promise you there are some very hard problems that you want to come back to with specific accessibility concerns. It happens.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also the kind of thing where it's like you can make it better, but it's not done. It might not ever be done, but you can always keep improving it, right?
The advice I'd like to echo is something that I believe Leonie Watson said when she was giving a talk about how to start doing accessibility, which is that if you try to make your entire app accessible, you're going to be scared and not going to do it. So fix one thing that really sucks about it, and then do the next thing next time. Obviously, we owe people with disabilities better applications than the ones that we build, and it would be great if we could simply make things that were more inclusive. But if you doing one piece at a time is the thing that makes it better, then do it that way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good stuff. All right, cool. How are we doing? We're over time already. That's all right. All right.
And just to 2:15.
Yeah, okay. Let's just say that that's what we do.
So I feel like we've been going to 2:15 every time, and like that's fine.
Yeah, okay, all right.
I mean, everyone else is fine with that. I'm just saying that you don't feel guilty.
Right. Love seeing stuff starting to stack up in the done column. So we have these two things in review. So, there's a thing called a walk the board stand up. I don't know if Caitlin or EJ, if you've ever experienced that, but so basically, you know, Scrum has the typical Scrum stand up is you're in an office together, which is just a weird concept to me now, but you stand in a circle and everyone goes around and they say, this is what I did yesterday, this is what I'm doing today, and these are my blockers. So that's sort of the traditional Scrum stand-up. But there's another type of stand-up, which is walk the board, and that's where you start with stuff that's in review, and you literally just go through the board and talk about all the issues and just to identify what's the state. Is there something that maybe somebody forgot to update the board and you can move it to done or something like that? Is there any, you know, things are starting to stack up in review, you kind of talk about that as a team and say who has time today to review these things, that kind of stuff, and then, you know, clarify any upcoming issues. So we'll kind of do, I guess, walk the board style a little bit. So render the table. It sounds, Caitlin, like you and Devon, well, I guess we're switching partners now, but you sounded like you want to kind of hold on to this one. So your new partner this week, I don't know who that is. Who's that?
Is it Shane? Like, yeah. Yeah, if that's okay with you, especially since Devon wasn't here to get the feedback for moving forward, I think it'd be easier for me to continue it.
So there's a little bit of work done to just kind of tidy that up, and then that should be ready for review hopefully pretty soon. So that's cool. Maybe I'll take that and reassign it to you, Caitlin. So I'm also going to put it back into in progress because it sounds like there's a little bit more work. needs to happen. And then the map pins, is that ready for review? Like
Yeah, we just pushed up, we've pushed up 2 commits during this meeting where we've kind of handled everything. So it's totally ready for review. And then once
Awesome.
it is, we can merge it into main.
Okay, cool. So that's great. And then
and Shane actually took care of the where you press return and you exit out. It works now.
oh, good.
Yeah.
Nice. So I think we may have talked about this already, but allow user to drag map to new location. So this is where stuff gets real, I feel like. So, oh no, this is where the app gets fun to use. Where stuff gets real is when we start using the user's location. But so this one, basically the idea is that you can drag the map around and the new center becomes like prompts a new API call that then renders new pins. So yeah, like one of the things that we'll just need to be careful about with this one is just making sure that we don't have a bunch of, like, as you drag, it'd be easy to have a bunch of API calls all firing. So I think this is the one, yeah, this is one where you want to get familiar with the events and kind of decide on an event that makes sense, that represents when the user has stopped panning around the map. That makes sense. There are a couple of events that could be used. So yeah, maybe there's a little exploration there to do, kind of see which one you think makes the most sense. Is there anything about this, like we should look at this through the story splitting lens, I guess. So are there any, I guess, fault lines? Let me just kind of cue that up again. Here, I'll post this in the channel so y'all have it. Sorry, put it in the thread. Anyway, so anything about this, any fault lines that we might want to split this down into some smaller ones?
So this story is just for the map to be updated, not the table. I mean, it might end up updating the table as well, but is that like an acceptance criteria? Like if the table for some reason isn't updating, is that going to be?
That's a great question. I think, if we switch the table to use the context, we're gonna get that for free, I think.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I think so too, but if we don't, is that part of the acceptance criteria?
Yeah, good question. What do people think? Should it be?
Do we have another ticket that would cover that work or no?
We don't currently, no.
I guess it should be.
Yeah, I think it should, just thinking about not necessarily us, but the next group that does this, right? So we're assuming that maybe there's more, yeah. So even if they don't have context, and I think it would make sense that you would want the map and the table, once they're both being rendered, to update simultaneously based on that.
But
I know that's adding more to the ticket when we're talking about story splitting, but.
Yeah. So I think that's the question, is is there, if you hadn't done context and maybe each of those components was responsible for itself, and the only thing you were doing was maybe updating the location in one place or something, then you can kind of imagine a scenario where, yeah, like they may not stay in sync. And would that be acceptable as a thing to ship to users, knowing that, soon after we would get the table to like staying in sync, right?
Right.
Yeah, I feel like we could add that to the AC, like make sure the table is in sync with the map.
Yeah.
Okay. Should be what was that name? The opposite of story splitting, that's fine. I think it's the right product decision, and I think in our case, because we're using context, it's going to be.
You're like, let's
free.
Story split, and we're like, let's add more.
Yeah, I'll scope creep instead. Okay. All right. I think And I think everybody understands that. We've actually now talked about that one twice. So, and then this one, open, please, open, maybe. How about opening? Maybe you could open. There you go. All right. So this is where it gets real. So, and the only reason I say it is like, I remember like when I built this app for myself the first time, it was the user location. Like you don't know when that's going to come in. Like at least with when you're dragging the map around, like it's very predictable. It's like there's an on drag start, an on drag end, and an idle, and like there's always events. And this is just like random. Here's a random event just in the middle of like what you think you're doing other things in the app, you know. So this one has the possibility of kind of like you just have to kind of manage the state because you could like maybe you drag the thing and then somebody hits the button to recenter on themselves, and so now you have like these kind of competing API calls that want to happen or something. So you just need to keep those things all maybe a little centralized or something, like maybe have one thing that's responsible for making the API calls that doesn't, but maybe there's like maybe you prefer the user's location over the drag center or something. I mean, there might be some decisions to make here architecturally. And I may be overcomplicating it too. It might be really simple if you get lucky, just implement it and it all works. I don't know. But basically this one, so this one's actually one where maybe we could split maybe. So the idea here is that the user, there's a button or something where the user says, share my location. And there's a prompt, and then we start gathering location information. So that could be, maybe that's one story. And maybe the other story is use that to render the map. Like right now, those two things are sort of in the same thing. Like you hit a button, you start getting the user's location, and you render the map based on that, on the user location. But now that I talk about it, maybe that's more scope than.
Yeah, it could be like one part is like you were saying, like the button, they get the new location, and also that part, if they don't accept, that button will handle both parts, because you can see the next part is like if they don't, I think when you're going down, yeah, if the user does not accept, so the button could handle both that, and then someone else could actually fetch the new pins or show the user. I don't know, maybe not. The user won't.
So yeah.
I feel like splitting this might make sense.
It seems like a steps thing, right? A little bit to me. Okay, so while you all are engaged in this other work, I will take a shot at splitting this down into two stories. So one, just so we're all clear, it's like one story will be, there's something in the interface that allows the user to start and then stop sharing their location. When you hit the start button, we store that in state somewhere, or we give maybe there's a context provider for that or something, right? Maybe there's a context provider that provides that to the location context. That's what location context uses, or something like that. Anyway, so that's one story. So basically, like kind of providing that information. If we do that, I guess wait a second, do we get the map rendering for free again if we set it up that way?
One thing I'm trying to think of is like the like order of like, so we have the map rendering at a static location like New Orleans, and then we have the user can drag the map to a new location, and then we have my location. So it's like we're gonna have to like tell the app the order of importance, like, so it's like, because we're gonna have all three of those in theory available, and we're gonna have to tell the app which one to use, right?
Yeah, so I'll show you how it works in the one that I built. So I share location, and it drags me down here. I actually have a setting thing. Change this to 0 so it goes faster. So now it's showing stuff around my place. So if I drag it, it now will show stuff around that center, and I have a button here to have it recenter back on me.
Cool.
So that's how I did it.
No, I like that.
Mhm.
And then if you turn off your sharing, it'll just go to the default location.
Yeah, I don't actually have a way to turn it off. So that's, but that does seem important to do. But for me, like if I just drag it around, then I know I'm not like looking at, like it's not even, I mean, I think it still might be providing the location to the app, but it's just ignoring it when I try to drag it around.
Interesting. Okay, that makes sense.
And then I start playing with the app because it's so fun. I love this app.
George,
So maybe,
take it away from him.
so it might be, let's see, maybe this shouldn't be split, because if we make a provider that basically like takes that data and feeds it to the location provider.
Can I ask that we schedule office hours really quick, because I do have to go shortly.
Oh yeah,
and
sure.
I want to make sure that we do that while we're here.
And maybe we do it, well, I guess midweek probably works, because we'll get stuff in review and then somebody's going to pick up this issue maybe later in the week. So we could talk about this in more detail, I guess. So
Yeah, sorry, I just need to go soon, and I want to be able to be here for everyone to schedule things.
yeah, for sure. Okay, let's do that now. And actually, I think these two issues would take a whole week by themselves. So I think we're probably fine for planning for the next week. So go for it, EJ.
Do we want to keep the same time and day that we did for last week? Because I can try to make that work if that would work for everyone else, or we can do earlier in the week. It's up to y'all.
I'm saying, I don't know, last week I couldn't make it, but no to Wednesday, because it's both the tech talk and I'm moving.
Oh wow.
Okay. No to Wednesday.
Yeah, if that.
So last week we did 3 p.m. Pacific on Thursday.
Okay,
Yep.
Thursday works for me.
Fine.
I have grooming at that time, so I wouldn't be able to come, but I don't know. That's fine.
Is there another time? I could do any time after that as well on Thursday. So from 3 p.m. onward would be fine with me, if that would work for anyone else.
Yeah, I could do 5 or 6 p.m. Pacific. 5 is kind of, I get a little tired around 9. So 5 to 6 is kind of my ideal meet last time with West Coasters. Does that work for you, Shane? Like 8 to 9 our time?
Caitlin, how about you?
Yep, that works.
So 5 p.m. Pacific on Thursday. If I say it out loud, I won't forget. I'm gonna write it down and I'll send everyone. I'll make a Zoom room around that time for everybody.
Perfect.
Thanks, EJ.
Yeah, of course. I'm looking forward to seeing all y'all then. I'm sorry I had to interrupt and cut and run, but I do have to go soon.
No, yeah, it's all good. I think we actually could probably wrap the call. Thanks everybody. Great work, and yeah. Let us know if you have any questions. Oh,
pick our issues? Sorry. Have we picked which issues we're working on this week?
Well, EJ, if you need to drop, we'll talk to you soon. New, although we have the one in review, and so let me just again look at who is.
What's on Wednesday? Did someone say there's a meeting on Wednesday?
There's the tech talks that we do every 2 weeks. And this one is going to be a big one. It has one of the original folks from the internet. Is that how you would say it, Andrew?
One of the sort of pillars of the fight for the open web from the early days. Yeah. Molly Holschlag.
And yeah, I help Andrew from a Collab Lab run those a little bit right now. So
nice. And those are usually at 2:30 Pacific time, right?
Yeah, this one's at 5. So
we're usually at 5. Once in a while we do an earlier one if we have a European involved or something. So yeah, that'll be 5 p.m. on Wednesday.
5 to 6:30. Here, I'll send a link out.
So yeah, so you have the one in review, and if you feel like it's truly just like it's going to get reviewed and move on, then you can pick up the next one. So if you I don't know if these have to be done. I kind of envisioned them being done in the order of like the first one to be done would be dragging the map, like getting that done, and then we'd start using the user's location. So are you okay with kind of taking it in that order?
Sure. So dragging the map is what Devon and I will work on, and you two will both first finish the table and then grab the next issue.
Yeah.
Is that, I'm just want to make sure. Okay, cool. So yeah, dragging them out. Sounds good.
Cool. All right. So I just assigned that to you, Rachel. And then I didn't assign anybody to the one of the user location just in case, who knows what might happen if things drag out or something. Or the other one, maybe I'll get through it fast or something. So you can assign yourself and just remember to put it in progress when you get started on it.
Sounds good. Yeah,
Cool.
I'll let Devon know that that's our issue.
All right. And I'll post those in the
Right. And then
well.
do you want me to remind Andrew or Ali on Slack about reviewing, or will y'all just review the issue and let us know at some point today?
What works better for me, I don't like GitHub notifications don't mean anything to me. They don't work very well. So it's best to tag me in on Slack.
Okay. I'll just
And you can just tag the TCL mentors or 20 mentors.
Okay, I'll just do it right now with like mentors. Well, I'm gonna do it in the Slack, in the PR, so you guys can still click on that link.
Cool. Right on.
Thanks,
Thanks everybody.
splitting talk, Andrew.
Yeah, you're welcome. You take that knowledge back to your job.
Yeah.
It applies to Scrum too. So
Mhm.
See y'all.
cool. Thanks a lot. See you later.
You're welcome.